All right, here you go. Because we're going alphabetical order. I went back to the same Leafs hat I wore this morning. Um, at the time I'm recording this, or Detroit fans like, what about the Larkin signing? I have 3 videos I set up at night before I go to bed. I get those out of the way first. The boards are all written on and all set up, and I can do this, and then we can get to whatever else is going on in the world of hockey that day. That's the way I've been doing this for a while. Um, the last 5 years, the Toronto Maple Leafs have been on a upswing. And I don't think that what they did over this summer is going to change that. They had 105 points last season, 95 the year before, 69 and 68 the 2 years before that, and 84 the year before that. What people remember with Toronto is this. They lost in Game 7 against the Bruins, and they lost badly. And it was a meltdown by goaltending and defense, and Gardner's taken plenty of flack. Zaitsev took plenty of flack during that series as well. And admittedly, there's a lot of reasons for that, and I don't blame fans for feeling that way. Certainly after Game 7, I felt Jake Gardner was really the biggest problem on that blue line. But Boston wins the game, Toronto goes out in the first round, and that's the narrative. And here's the funny thing: so they've made the playoffs the last 2 years, and they've lost in the first round. They missed the playoffs 3 years before that. People look back at 2003 and they go, you know what? They haven't won a series in well over a decade, and it's the same old Leafs. This is not the same old Leafs. This isn't these guys. I detest these guys. These the Aretinas. That's a bad thing. I don't know why I got this, but it's the first time I've worn it in a video. So there you go. I got this yesterday, which is funny because if you just watched the Tampa preview, I just got a Tampa jersey yesterday too. No, I don't have Vancouver and Vegas jerseys arriving today. That'd be kind of weird. But when you look at Toronto, they're building towards something. And for anybody who right now is saying, they're just going to be out in the first round again, you're totally discounting what happened this past offseason, or this current offseason. They made the playoffs, as I said, the last 2 years. They made the playoffs in 67 out of 101 years they've been in the league. This is the 4th year for Babcock and the first year for GM Kyle Dubas. Now, Dubas has a big job ahead of him, and it's not done by any means. He has a very tricky balancing act he has to do with the Leafs. Number 1 in cap hit is Tavares. Marleau's number 2. Morgan Rielly and Freddie Anderson are tied for 3rd. Zaitsev and Kadri are tied for 4th. And there's Gardner, who's a UFA next summer. That's $4 million coming off the cap. Now, either they're going to trade him or they're going to try to re-sign him, but I honestly think Gardner's going to end up going. Because right or wrong, he is seen as the minus player. And I honestly, I like Jake Gardner. If Gardner got traded to Boston, for instance, I'd be perfectly fine with that. The problem is it would probably cost Torrey Krug, and I'd be less enthused if that was the price. The plus player for me is Mitch Marner. Marner is an absolute spark plug out there. The guy's dynamite every time he's on the ice. I have been a huge Marner fan from the moment he first joined the NHL with the Leafs, and I support him no matter what. And I swear, if Babcock drops him down to 3rd or 4th line duty, I'm going to be very unhappy with him. The MVP, though, is Matthews. So despite what happened this past summer, where John Tavares comes in and he's making all kinds of money, really what's going to set this team apart, what's going to make this team fantastic, top of the league, isn't going to be what Tavares does. It's going to be what Matthews does. Because there's 2 ways this can go. The pressure's off Matthews, skyrockets. Or pressure's off Matthews, and he just sort of levels off. Tavares is here. He can handle it. I'm not saying Matthews is that kind of guy, but we've seen that in the league before, where you add a superstar player, and then other players, maybe they don't play as hard. Maybe they take it for granted. Like, well, we're going to make it. And then at the end of the year, you look and you go, wait, what happened? What happened? Why did we fail this year? And it's because maybe some guys took their feet off the pedal, knowing that Tavares is there. Top 6 forwards: Marleau, Matthews, Nylander, Hyman, Tavares, and Marner. Can we marvel at the fact that it's not that long ago none of these guys were Maple Leafs? That, unless you count the last 2 seasons, before those 2 seasons, none of these guys were around. And can we also marvel at the fact that Hyman is still top 6? Because that's pretty insane. They lose JVR. They lose Bozak. And I would honestly say that hurt if not for the addition of Tavares. Now, What the Leafs are going to try to do this year, and I think they can successfully do this, they're going to be one of those teams that has two first lines. That first line may change from game to game. That first line might change during the game. So maybe the Matthews line isn't rolling. Tavares' line gets double shifted. It is a pretty deadly combination. And no, Tavares never won a Stanley Cup in New York with the Islanders, but he never really had a team that could compete for it either. This team can compete for the Stanley Cup. Now, I'm not looking at them and saying they will win it, because that's a bridge too far for me. But I am seeing them as improving even more this year in the regular season. The blue line is tricky. Riley, Hainsey, Gardner, and Zaitsev. I honestly think Dermott's going to end up being in that top four somehow this year. Whether it's Zaitsev getting dropped down, because we know Gardner and Zaitsev, not great. The idea was simple. Gardner is your offensive guy. Zaitsev's the defensive guy covering. It didn't work out that way for them this past season. And they'll be looking to fix that. In net, Anderson and McElhinney. And I know there's all kinds of people waiting for Garrett Sparks to get that shot. And thinking that Garrett Sparks coming off the Calder Cup is probably going to get that shot. But I'm not as convinced of that. Additions, Tavares, Tyler Ennis comes in, Par Lindholm, Josh Juris, and Adam Cracknell. Now, I've been a Cracknell fan since he was a Canuck, and I liked him in Dallas. And honestly, he's a good utility guy, as I would refer to him, the sort of the Swiss Army knife type player. He can kind of do a little bit of everything. He is not a top six talent, but he works. He works really hard on the ice, and I have absolutely no issues with him being in a roster. If Toronto ended up needing him on the fourth line due to injury, I don't think they suffer because of that. Now, potential rookies, there's a number in here, and 3 of them are defensemen. Now, they didn't sign Igor Ozaganov to come over and not play. They didn't. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with him. Does he make the team out of camp? Does he end up getting sent down to the American League? What do they do? Calle Rosen's an interesting one as well. He played a handful, I think it was 4 games for them last year. And Garrett Sparks, as mentioned, and of course Justin Hall. Justin Hall plays 2 games for the Leafs this past season. 2 goals in 2 games. Hey, the kid was on pace for 82 goals. I suspect Bettman decided not to have him in there because he doesn't want a Maple Leaf leading the league in goals. I'm kidding, of course. That's totally me kidding. Remember, Shannon, always qualify your sarcasm by pointing out its sarcasm. But in all honesty, Hall put up decent numbers in the American League. Looked decent for them in the playoffs as well. And I say decent, meaning they were a championship team. I do think that the one thing I would say to Leafs fans is this. Winning a Calder Cup is fun. It's great for your farm team. It's awesome. But it doesn't necessarily translate to those players having NHL success. It doesn't necessarily translate to amazing success for the franchise at the National Hockey League level. It just means that your farm team was pretty good. It means the guys that you're bringing in are likely closer to NHL ready than you might get with a team who has a poor farm team. Now, how did the channel vote? The channel, 25.7% of you said they're going to finish first. 63.5% said second. 8.7% said third. 0.8% said fourth. 0.2% said fifth. What's interesting with Toronto is how much they match Montreal. 1 vote said sixth. 1 vote said seventh. 0.2% said eighth. So we had singular votes of 6th and 7th. We had no votes in 2nd for Montreal and almost no votes for 1st, 2nd, or 3rd for Ottawa. So in their division, they are seen as far and beyond the best team out of Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal. Go back 2 years. When they originally drafted Matthews and they had Marner in the system and Nylander coming in, nobody expected the 95-point season. They improved to 105 points, and again, people right now who aren't, mostly people who don't want to see the Leafs succeed or don't like the Leafs. Tired of hearing about Toronto. We're tired of it. We're tired of it. There's a perception that the team didn't take any steps forward because this is the same. This narrative is the same. Well, they still lost in the first round. 2017, they lost to the Capitals. 2018, they lost to the Bruins. Both years, they lost to teams that were out in the second round. They're not any good. They had a meltdown in Game 7 against Boston, exactly the same as in 2013 against Boston. So it's the same. except that it's not. The 2013 meltdown was on Reimer. Reimer's not here. The 2018 meltdown, rightly or wrongly, is put at the feet of Jake Gardiner. It's not the same team, though. And I said that before that Game 7, and then Boston trashed Toronto, and I didn't know what was going on, and I knew Boston wasn't that good. But coming out of that game, it looked like they were, and then against Tampa, there was a reality check for the Bruins and for some of Boston's fans. Now, for Toronto fans, I think what's going to happen this year is simple. I think this team has a shot at the President's Trophy. Now, the President's Trophy is going to rely on a very consistent season from Anderson and some really solid work on the blue line. And that's why I have 3 defensemen and I have 4 potential rookies on here. Because Kyle Dubas knows the blue line's been an issue. He knows what he's got in Justin Hall. He knows what he's got with the Marlies. So he may end up being a guy who has that inside track on a spot. And I'll tell you why I'm fine with making that conclusion. This is the lineup as provided by Andrew Pillock, who has Andrew Pillock Hockey on YouTube. And closest I ever got to a collaboration was where he asked me to do a video, and I did it. He did a video, and then he said, I challenge the hockey guy to do it. And I'm like, all right, so I did it. But here's his lines. Marleau, Matthews, and Nylander, Hyman, Tavares, and Marner. I would not be surprised to see Marleau with Tavares and Marner. Because Hyman and Matthews end up together regularly. Johnsson, Kadri, and Kapanen shows just how solid they are down the middle. I didn't even mention Kadri in my preview because he's not top 6, but anywhere else he would be. Ennis, Lindholm, and Brown. I'm gonna make kind of a prediction here now. He has Ennis over Levo because he believes that when Ennis was signed, he was likely told, and this is probably true, that he would get a shot at a roster spot out of camp. I think Levo will end up beating Ennis out of that spot. Not right away. I agree that this is probably how it goes for their team. Now, I'll be interested to see how Johnsson does as well with top 9 minutes. On the blue line, Riley and Hainsey. He has Gardner with Carrick because Gardner and Zaitsev had so many issues, and Dermott and Zaitsev as your third pairing, and he said that Hall would replace Carrick. I do not mean to have Hall in the top 4. That's not what he was saying. Just that if Carrick comes out of the lineup because he is not playing to what they want, Hall may get that spot. In net, Anderson, McElhinney, and then Sparks is the wild card. Because Sparks, getting his team to where they got, that whole Calder Cup thing, maybe they give Sparks that shot. Maybe McElhinney ends up on the waiver wire in September or early October. There's always surprises with waivers in early October. And the one that I think of is Calvin Pickard. The Calvin Pickard, who looked like he was going to be a backup, Vegas went, nope, cast him aside. Toronto ends up getting him. And then Toronto keeps him in the minors. He's nowhere on my list. Nowhere on Andrew's list. He's nowhere to be found. So there you go. Your Toronto Maple Leafs. Oh, you want to know my prediction? My prediction for the Leafs, I think they end up finishing first in their division. Wouldn't be surprised if they challenge for first in the East. And I think they're going to be right there till the end. The only thing with this is it will create an expectation that they're going to win the Stanley Cup. So if in the playoffs they lose in the third round, the narrative's still going to be that they're not good enough and they're not going to get there. This shows that the storyline the Leafs are writing right now has only been in motion for 2 years. Shannon plan has been a gradual build. And I you know what? I really dislike that term. I know that's what they call it, but it sounds so weird and silly to me, but Shannon plan it is. But they're building to something, and I don't know that it happens this year. I don't know that the Stanley Cup is theirs this year. But I still think they have an excellent shot at it. I really do. Better than these retinas, guys, whatever an retina is. See, it looks like a retina. But I will say that having this in person, the one thing that I couldn't see was the outline, the actual really nice stitching on the tee, which is actually a really nice choice, and it's actually a pretty sharp jersey. So there you go. Your 2018-19 Toronto Maple Leafs preview. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Again, I know most of the channel disagrees with me. A large portion of the channel disagrees with me. But I can't just go along with what everybody else says, because It's not. I look at this team and I say they were 8 points behind Tampa. They've at least made up those 8 points. So we'll see what happens for them this coming season. All right. So that being said, and knowing that this won't be a popular opinion, again, hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.